This letter that you refer to, this is the letter that I wrote for the book that you're writing, which will be a letter left by the captain of the vessel that Scirocco, or as I've referred to him as Rocco in a shortening of his name. He gets this letter from the departed captain, so with that understanding of this is from the dearly departed, I read as follows. My dear Rocco, it's been a long time since we have spoken or seen to or spoken. Let me start from the beginning. It's been a long time since we have spoken to or seen one another. Now it's too late. If you are reading this, then it means that I am no longer alive. Isn't it odd how we always thought the sun was so good for us, and all the while it was killing us? Well, all my years in the sun finally caught up to me. So funny how the closer we get to death, the clearer the past is seen. I guess it's because there's no future to see. I can see you so clearly back when you were just a kid in a chef's hat. Best charter chef I ever had. Too good. The high-paying restaurants wanted you, and the big money and those pretty girls won. Oh, I've had some good chefs and some bad ones, but you were a lot different. More like a son than an employee or a deckhand. And I remember so well that sunny winter day when I pulled into the harbor in St. Thomas. You were running that place up on the side of the mountain, Bluebeards or Blackbeards or something. You must have recognized my old boat right away because you were on the dock before the customs could finally clearing and get off. A lot of drinks and tall tales that night. That was a winter to remember. That's when you got me started writing poetry. Not that I ever thought it was real good, but many a lady has had a tear in her eye and her hand on my leg when she said, "Why, Captain, I didn't know you could write poetry." And remember that big black-haired girl? Damn, she was pretty. I can see her clear as day telling you and the gang to get the hell out of my stateroom because she had things on her mind and her husband wasn't going to stay passed out forever. Keeping him drunk that winter sure cost me a lot of rum. I saw him a couple of years ago. They're divorced, you know. Well, on to more important things. The love of my life, the Elegante, is yours. You are the only one I can see on her. I could have sold her, but where I'm going, I don't really need the money. In my stateroom, now your stateroom, is my old tin box with a deed of gift, paid-up insurance papers, and my charter list. She just came out of the boatyard, and so the paint is fresh and the bottom is clean. There is a list of final requests, not orders, as I remember how you hated orders. There are some places I wish you to see, some people you should meet, and my ashes to scatter. Well, old friend, good sailing, and remember, I'll be there looking over your shoulder. Your friend in life and death, Captain Don.
Well done, piece of work. I liked the fact that you wove in the personal commentary, that just the remembering an experience or relating something that sort of reflects your character to a degree.
Well, it was a very easy letter to sit and write. All I had to do was just take and visualize the fact that it was the last letter that I was writing. So much of this whole thing right now would be so easy to do because of the thing. You know, it's kind of like writing that almost last poem type thing about, you know, there he sits at the bar all alone. You know, it is kind of the end of the trail type thing. And although I don't see the end of the trail tomorrow, but there's a lot less trail in front than there is in back. You know? So, yeah, it's easy to get a little maudlin, I guess, as the days go by and you realize there's not as many of them as you'd like there to be.
Seasons do bring that about. There's one thing I want to add to this.
Yeah, we can read a few of these, and then I'll read the end of it. These are mostly written. I really haven't written much in the last few years. I would probably get back to writing more things of my own if I was back on a boat, on a continual thing where you've got the hours and hours of traveling and being somewhat on lookout, all during the day, and you're running the boat and navigating and everything, your mind has got plenty of time to...
And no concern about, no distraction.
Yeah, no distractions at all.
No concern about where the dollar's coming from.
So these are some things that were written mostly during the late 70s when I was running the charter yacht. I'll read a couple of them. I'm not going to read all of them. But
that's fine.
There's one here that I call Season's End, more on a humorous line. And it says, the engineer was stoned, the ship was a wreck. Repairs he was unable to make as he wandered the slippery decks. 10 days at sea they had been on only a 4-day run. The captain he could have cared less for another bottle he had begun. The beans are done, the chef he cried, that's all that you will get, and even the beans are damn near gone, and land we've not seen yet. But the chef, like the rest, could really care less, and he really was quite merry, for under the sink where no one would look was a half a case of cooking sherry. The steward is below just having a ball, making a mess in all the heads. Then he looked around and laughed again, and he messed up all the beds. The rest of the crew, they lay on the deck catching a little sun. The hell with the teak, the curtains and chrome. It's time to have a little fun. Isles of paradise they had seen, all from the deck of this ship. The promises made by the owner, from his mind they seemed to slip. The owner was finally gone, and an ass he had proved to be. And when they finally did get home, the last of this ship they would see. Which is a very common thing. The majority of the guys would hit back to the dock, and they were generally good for one season. But that old story about the grass is always greener, they'd jump to the next ship and find out it was twice as bad as the one they just got off of. And when I think of the engineer that I refer to in that, was a young lad named Michael Green. He's now running small tugboats in the waters of Fort Lauderdale.
The one who married Michelle, right?
Right.
Yeah.
And when they got married, they wanted me to perform the service and write them a little piece of something. Yeah. And this is what I wrote for Michael and Michelle. This is only a short story of this verse will tell. A story of two young people named Michael and Michelle. When Michael I first met, a ladies' man was he. Work he'd rather not do, he'd sooner lay by the sea. Now this type of life needs funds, and funds are gained by labor. So 'twas a good thing our paths had crossed, for we did each other a favor. Work is what he asked for, an engineer was my need. Plenty of work he damn well found, and an engineer he was indeed. Some months later in New England, while tied to a Newport quay, a deckhand approached with a smile and said, "There's a girl outside you should see." A school teacher is what I am, but at this I don't feel free. This coming term I still must teach, and when that's done, a job at sea. Oh, I've heard this said so many times, 1,000 times at least or more. When that school season was over, there stood Michelle at my office door. Determination got her a job, but fate was not done yet, for it was here on the yachts under God's master plan that Michael and Michelle had met. Now Michael is the yacht's captain with a whole new purpose in life, and by now I suppose you've guessed, Michelle will be the captain's wife. That marriage lasted such a short duration that was the last one that I wanted to do. I said, I was not blessed with the ability to take and put people together to stay very long, so I didn't want to do that.
I remember meeting her on your yacht as well sometime later.
Yeah.
She actually came to see me here in North Carolina a few times.
Oh, yeah?
One of the pictures in the album I showed you was her.
I didn't even recognize her.
It wasn't a nude, she was I'll pull it out later.
Yeah.
But we hung out for a while.
Yeah, she was, I saw her not too long ago.
What's she doing?
Didn't look a whole lot different.
Married again?
No, she's single. We have a lot in common, I think. We both like girls.
Oh no, she's okay.
But
that happened to Diane as well, I understand. She went totally lesbian.
Yeah. Well, I did a lot of research into that back in the days when I was somewhat of a playboy. And I used to ask most of the ladies that were sharing my room for the evening. I used to always look, people used to get upset that were working for me, and they'd bring people to see the boat over the little sign that I had over my stateroom door, and it says, "All the ladies that come through this door have made me happy. Some by coming and some by leaving." Michelle spent a lot of time there, and many others. And I used to ask him, I says, you know, have you ever made love with another lady? And it was amazing how many either had or that wanted to.
Mm-hmm.
And so I delved into well, why? And not very complimentary to males. The majority of them would say no, they weren't in pursuance of women to the exclusion of males. They said they'd love to have males as lovers all the time if they just weren't such lousy lovers. You know, they said that if you wanted to have any tenderness and compassion and romance in life, that it almost had to be with another female. And I said, God, you know, gave you a lot to think about. If you had that in mind the next time you got together with a lady, you tried to be a little nicer and a little softer and a little more tender, and it paid off well.
Yeah.
You know.
Well, that's something that I've always enjoyed immensely, is just the sort of languishing around, being tender. Just,
well, the difference in making love and getting laid, you know.
Yeah,
but,
absolutely. Of course, the heart has to be there too.
Yeah. This was always one of my favorites because I've always been so emotionally tied to my boat crew. You know, as the nickname was given many, many years ago, was Papa Bear. And it was always taking care of my children, you know. And so I wrote this one about my favorite boat crew. It's called Partings of Men. As another long winter is over, of this I am damn glad. I'm more than happy it's over, except one thing makes me sad. Unlike our northern cousins who suffer in ice and snow, my winter was spent in paradise. At least that's what I'm told. In the lovely Caribbean waters is where my winter was spent, yachting around the various isles with people who cared not where they went. But sad I said I was, and sad I really am, for as this season is over, I will lose most all my men. My profession is yacht captain. Large yachts are what I run. I entertain the rich and famous, or whoever can afford the sun. Many a crew I've hired and some good men I've had, but never a crew who worked as well, or whose leaving will make me as sad. Some have been a whole year now, some not quite as long. I'll hear them often with their crazy stories and silly songs. Like a bunch of young brothers, they work, full of good spirits and happy and bold. It makes me think of seasons gone past, and I realize that I'm getting old. They worked like hell, this crew of mine, 100 hours a week and more, but after work, the ladies they chased, I only wished someone had kept score. All the ladies they chased and caught from St. Thomas to St. Martin, many a heart they caused to beat fast, more than a few were broken. Guidance and advice I gave them, even when it wasn't sought. I hope my efforts were not in vain, all my lessons are not soon forgot. Now they'll go their separate ways with hardly a look behind, and with a tear in my eye I'll see them go, for like sons they will remain in my mind. That was written in Marigold Bay at St. Martin, aboard the La Costa Brava II on April 24th of 78.
Always thought that was one of your best pieces.
Yeah. But it's so funny, you know, as I'm sitting there and here talking about the fact that it makes me realize that I'm getting old. This was done in 78, and I don't feel a lick older than I did in 78. Either there's some kind of a warped ego in place there or whatever.
It's almost prophetic in a sense.
Yeah.
It makes more sense now.
Yeah, a lot more now.
Yeah. I remember being part of that crew, at least on the home run.
Yeah, right.
We stopped off in the Exuma Islands.
Yep. Georgetown. Yeah, there's some stuff.
Go ahead and finish it if you don't mind.
Well, there's one here that I wrote for my dear past wife, Phyllis.
Oh, yeah.
And Phyllis always makes me think of the fact of how I took her for granted, and it's a problem with a seaman's life. You know, you live unto yourself, you live for that day, and you seldom are thinking about anything land-based, because you realize that once you're off the dock and you're gone, there's really nothing that you can do about anything that's land-based. And so after a few years, you just separate your existence so much that you sorely ignore the loved ones that stay ashore. Anyway, I wrote this for Phyllis. It's called Reflections. Memory is a wonderful thing, for without this wondrous gift, gone forever would be the past, but instead we can relive it. We tend to remember the good times the most, for they are so many more, though sometimes the unhappy with all its pain comes sneaking in through memory's door. But of the good and the happy times of my life with you, these things I think of now, and I hope that you will too. From that very first time that I saw you until the last time that I left, 20-some-odd years have gone by, with many a year to come yet. Our life together produced a child, a warm and wonderful thing of joy. And after seeing this beautiful lady grow, I'm so thankful she wasn't a boy. For she is her mother's daughter in oh so many ways, and many a trait that she has now remind me of you in younger days. It seems we spent our whole life long moving from place to place, looking for only God knows what, and running with myself a race. I am but searching for happiness, this I always tried. How foolish I was, for had I but looked, happiness was by my side. I'm sure I've hurt you many times with all my inconsiderate ways, but with your patience and understanding, I hope we'll both have better days. It's easy to curse at the demands of my job as it takes me away so many days, but perhaps if we look closer, a blessing it's been, for I now see the errors of some of my ways. As only God is perfect, then perfect I'll never be, but as time goes on, the older I get, in the distance I see a different me. Now as I sit here on my boat and I think of my distant home, your presence here beside me I feel, and I know that I'm not alone. Soon I'll be heading home again, perhaps this time to stay, for the life of the wanderer does get old, and I'm tiring of my wandering ways. Unfortunately, there was a passing thought, and I got home only to turn around and leave again. I remember the time when I got home and somebody had talked me into taking a job on a 149-foot tugboat in Europe. And I came home to pick up some winter clothing, which I had in storage at the house, which I never used, of course, in my line of work. But I got there and I was going to Holland January, February, and March. And I got there and I realized that, oh, hell, this is the weekend I'd given Phyllis some money to take she and Janice to Disney World. And so I just left her a note in the typical boat captain's manner, you know, have gone to Holland, see you in the spring. And people say, you couldn't leave. And I said, well, of course. What else would I say? You know, that's where I was going. So I called her about 2-3 weeks later, and she says, where are you? And I said, oh, I'm in a little town called Maaslaus, Holland, on the Europort Canal, about 20 kilometers from Rotterdam. And she said, you really did go over there? And I said, yeah, I left you a note, you know. And I said, I'll be home sometime in the spring or early summer, you know. And she said, well, that's fine, send money. But though my days are so busy with every day was a new adventure that for me the time flew, and I didn't realize until I spoke to her many years later, and she was nearing her deathbed, and she said that those were some long days, you know, for her being at home and with nothing to think about except the fact that, well, he's gone, you know. We think of class an awful lot of, oh, that was a high-class person, or that's a low-class bum, and so forth. And we entertained so many people, and class always came to be a subject of discussion. So I wrote this little thing, and I called it Class. It is something you really don't learn, this thing that we call class, or if you're born to have it, it will show as time does pass. Poor people seek it not knowing where it's at, and rich people think they have it, but at most we have to laugh. We in the yachts entertain the new rich and the offspring of old money, but new or old it costs like hell to spend winters where it's sunny. Class, thank God, can be both high and low, so enable everyone to have some, or if this option were not there, most of our guests would have none. Most we call the animals, and we pay them little mind as to really to compare them with animals. To the animals we'd be unkind. If they could only see themselves at their mostly phony ways, they would see the class that they've developed mostly comes from poorer days. Generally young and tender ladies, the men they most often bring, and what we see we soon forget. As to us, it doesn't mean a thing. For them we most often feel pity as they try to earn their way, because old and battered egos can make hell of their short stay. Not to say that all of our guests are of this basic type, for we've also had a steady flow of folks who were a true delight. We've had the stars of stage and screen, and mostly they were grand, but I will admit we're some that drown. We wouldn't lend a helping hand. When the good ones leave, we drink to them and say they were first class. When the others leave, we also drink, and drink some more to make the memory pass. But to write complaint is not my intent, nor do I wish to sit in the stew. I am but making comments of the feelings of my yacht crew.
Bravo.
Yeah, that's about the way we felt about most of them.
Yeah.
I want to read the one last thing because it's kind of the end of the line, if I can find it again. Here. It's... I may do some final editing on this before I print it up. Send it off for publication in some magazine somewhere. I haven't even titled it, but it's kind of a, maybe I'll call it something like The End of the Road. It's there that he sits at the bar all alone. He drinks by himself. Most of the friends are gone. The sparkle in his eyes has faded, the red in his beard turned white. Nights in the bars are fewer now, but this one may be a long night. Nights like these he drinks alone and thinks of time has gone past. Days he knows are numbered now. Why must they go so fast? When finally the days have all gone and they carry his ashes to sea, they'll probably be carried by strangers, family or friends you'll not see. The family he so sorely ignored during his earthly stay, why should they be bothered now, if they even know it's his burial day? Many a crewman has left him, most of them shook his hand. Captain, if it wasn't for this girl that I love, right here by your side, I would stand. Then they took their jobs ashore and families they did raise. Now and then they would see each other, laugh and drink and sing the captain's praise. Remember when he said he could outdrink us all, could outrun us and outfight us? And while we'd stop and rest, he'd be ready to play when the ladies would come to call. I wonder where he is today, says one ex-mate while holding his son. Hell, he's on an island someplace with 2 girls, some grass, and a bottle of rum. Most of the old crew are surrounded by family in a happy home, not knowing their old captain sits at a bar all alone. Think about that sometimes. Think about that a lot. Think just as soon that wasn't really the end chapter. But can't tell. At this late age, I may just turn around and find some lady and start another family.
It's entirely possible you will. May meet a young punk out there someday.
Yeah, I start feeling a little old now and then until every once in a while I was sitting not long ago and some young kid was just irritating the shit out of me. You know, and I'm sitting there and I'm thinking, oh, I'm old and settled down, and he kept bugging me and kept bugging me. I could feel myself starting to pump up like Popeye, you know. It wasn't long and I said, boy, if you don't shut your goddamn mouth, I'm going to just get up and whip your ass, you know. And he started to say something, and I guess it was just a look in the eye or whatever, or either that or maybe some of the old stories that he'd heard, you know, and he just backed off, and slowly I could feel it all deflating and saying, you know, well, I guess I haven't quite grown up yet, you know.
I remember one time going to a movie theater with Daniele, talk about images and things, just sort of energy you exude. Went to see this film, and there were a couple of punks sitting in front of us that just kept going on back and forth, and I tolerated it for a few minutes, and I finally leaned forward and said, guys, do me a favor, we came here to watch the movie, and really appreciate if you guys sort of backed off, cut the conversation. And they looked at me, and I could hear them sort of murmuring to each other. I said, we'll just go ahead and kick his ass when he leaves, you know, when he gets out of here. Daniele heard that, and she's kind of looking at me like, what, have you started? And I just figured, if there's going to be a scene in the parking lot, I'll do the best I can. And I just didn't think much more about it. It was still my biking days. So the movie's over. They didn't murmur much anymore. But I knew something was going to happen outside. They get up, and they both sort of turn around and give me this glance, which I knew I'd see again. And I get up, pull up my leather jacket, put on my leather jacket. By the time I reached for the motorcycle helmet, they were gone.
Yeah. It's, what's that old story about? It's not the size of the dog in the fight, it's the size of the fight.
Fighting the dog, yeah.
Yeah.
The old biker image.